Welcome to the Health, Life, and More for Women podcast. This is a podcast for women who are ready to ditch diets, ditch the scale, and food guilt forever, and instead invite peace with food, body trust, and confidence in all of your choices. This show will shed some light on sneaky ways diet culture has infiltrated your thoughts, your family, and your well-being. I believe that no matter the episode, you'll walk away feeling informed, inspired, and encouraged. I'm your host, Jennifer D'Amato. I'm a certified intuitive eating counselor, coach, a mom of 4 daughters, a lover of all things pink, and I can't wait to dive into each and every episode with you. Let's dive in now. Hey ladies, welcome to episode 136. We are on the third principle of intuitive eating. Now, if you're just kind of finding this podcast, you're just tuning in, don't worry. You don't really even have to listen to these episodes in sequential order. You might even find that there's one particular principle you want to start with and then work your way back. If you are just tuning in and you want to head back to episode 134, which is Principle 1, Reject Diet Mentality, episode 135, Principle 2, Honor Your Hunger, which is my favorite. Those are part of the series as well. You can even boot scoot all the way back to episode 133, where I talked about what is and is not intuitive eating. I'm doing this whole series, like all summer long in 2022. I'm going through each of the principles and sharing what is the takeaways. What do we want to grab from these? I know it can be really overwhelming. I hear from my clients all the time, Jen, I've tried to read the book or I've read the book, but I'm stuck still, or there's so much information there. It's one of my favorite reference books for this work. Of course, it is like the anchor, but it's hard to kind of take it all in. So what I'm doing here in this series is kind of laying out some important things, some things to think about, some things to chew on. And what I've also done is included a workbook for you for the entire series. You can purchase the workbook anytime. You don't have to purchase it right at the beginning. If you're listening now and you're like, I want the workbook because it has key points, a place for me to take notes during the episode, and deep dive questions on each principle you won't get here on the podcast, you can head into the show notes or head to healthcoachforlife.com/IE workbook and grab the workbook. It's a one-time cost. It's $40 and you have it for the entire 11-week series. All right, but enough about that. Let's make some peace. Peace, not war. Making peace with food is the third principle. I've said this before. You don't have to, in your own journey, go through these principles in this order. This is how they're laid out in the book. There's some methodology to that, but I find that making peace with food really does come up at the beginning. If we're not honoring our hunger, like we're not eating, it's hard to make peace with food. So honoring our hunger is really top of the list. But making peace with food is starting to remove the stress, starting to remove the fear, starting to remove this like war we are in with food and our own body. So I think putting it here in this positioning, this third principle is important, not totally necessary. I even have some clients who are like, I'm really, really struggling with even feeling fullness in my body, and they want to spend more time there before making peace with food because they are eating and they just want to go there. But this principle is still very important because we have so many messages going on in our head about food. Some that have been there like for so long. Most of my clients or women I talk to are like, I don't even know. I guess I've always thought that. I've always believed that. We spend so much of our time, our life, our thought process in fear of foods or feeling really stressed around food, or maybe that stress even comes after having the food. Could we acknowledge for a moment the enemy here when it comes to diet culture is diets. It's not food. We're taught these moralistic labels for food, right? So that food becomes our enemy. These certain foods are bad. And you could follow throughout history, like a whole timeline of which foods fell in that category. But I want you to think about this for a moment. If food has become the enemy, if there's stress or fear or guilt or any of these things around food, we are in this negative relationship with something that is literally keeping us alive. The thing we need to survive and exist, we have a negative relationship with it. And we're taught that if we try to control it, we control what we eat, we control this food, that we will be in control. But I've proven, we've seen, we know the opposite is true. We're actually giving food control over our life instead of us being the ones in control. Now, I've shared about this on the podcast several times. I talk about this in my private community on Facebook as well, which is also linked in the show notes. It's also linked on my website if you want to join us. But what I've talked about is the relationship between restricting and that feeling of out of control, that overeating. So when we restrict food, right, and we restrict food because we believe it's bad, we shouldn't have it, that we need to limit the amount of XYZ. We all know it's carbs right now. Right now. Hasn't always been that way. We actually feel out of control around the food we're restricting. You know, there's a time period some of us can, not partake in having that food, right? We're like, no, I'm going to be really good. I wish you could see my air quotes. I'm probably going to air quote more times than anyone should ever do that on a podcast. But how, we can be good, right? I'm so good today. How many times have you said that? Over the course of your adult life, oh, I was so good today. And that didn't mean you didn't go out and, harm someone, steal, treat people poorly. No, you're talking about your food intake. How many times have you said that? And then how many times has that turned into feeling out of control around food, around the foods that you've felt, I was so good not having that? Because that's what happens. It's actually a biological response. When we are deprived of something, when we are restricting, there is both a mental and physical deprivation that's happening. Have you ever had that experience? You're not eating all day, you're going out tonight, it's girls' night out, you're going on a date, and then you go out and you eat so much. You actually feel like you're out of control. It's not you. This is a natural response that your body has. So one of the things that I do in the work when I'm first starting off with a client, even though we're not necessarily addressing making peace with food right away, one of the things I ask that they allow for is giving themselves unconditional permission to eat. Now that means there's no rules. They don't have anything that they're following. There's definitely no, earning or burning. There's no restriction at all of any foods. They can eat as much as they want. They can eat when they want, anything. Now, we have this kind of as an agreement, and I know they need to do this to be able to allow for the thoughts about food, the beliefs they've held about food in their body to come up. Sometimes they're a little hesitant, like, okay. And they really are working at eating those foods that have been restricted or had a lot of restrictive thoughts. They're working at having it without the guilt, the fear, the shame, the shoulds and shouldn'ts. There's a phrase I use with a lot of my clients. If you have little kids listening, if you're listening to this in the car, I'm about to say a word that, you may not want them to hear. There's my warning for you. A phrase a lot of my clients use and I share on there is, you are a grown ass woman. Like, this phrase is something I had to repeat to myself. I am a grown ass woman. I can make whatever decision I want for my body. If I want to go back for another helping, if I want to take some extra of some particular food group, if I don't want to eat something, if I'm not in the mood for it, maybe that's even a salad or vegetables, right? Like all these things. I'm a grown ass woman. I actually have autonomy over my body. I have a client who recently, she's working through this, and the thought came up of, I should be full. I should be. And, had to work through why she could, as a grown ass woman, go back and get more food. Here's the other part of making peace with food that I've kind of touched on, but I want to be really specific about is we have been taught these moralistic food labels. And that might be as simple as good and bad. These foods are good, these foods are bad. And what happens is we do internalize those labels. I'm good, I'm bad, depending on what I ate. It can be very difficult and a long process to let go of these labels, to let go of this moralistic value we've placed on food in our body depending on what we've eaten. And of course it is why. It's out there everywhere. You've even heard these terms like clean eating, Oh my gosh. I can't say it without laughing because it's not a real thing. The only thing that makes eating clean is literally the washing of, maybe your fruits and vegetables. It's a sneaky diet culture term that has aided in this moralistic valuing of food, this good and bad. Oh, I ate really clean today. What in the world does that mean? I'll give you the big hint here. It means nothing. It is a made up term to maybe move away from saying good and bad to saying, well, I ate clean. What does the opposite? I ate dirty? No. So when we are making peace with food, part of it is really breaking down these labels and these terms. When I talked early on in this series about, intuitive eating is a mind-body connection. Again, you see this coming up in every principle, but again, in the principle of making peace with food, of how much your thoughts, the mind is connected with what we're choosing for our body. So what would happen if you gave yourself unconditional permission to eat? Meaning, what if you ate only what you really wanted? What if you ate food without any judgment, without fear, without criticism of your choices? Now, I know even that thought, right? Again, I do this with my clients all the time, that when I present this, it's like fear, like from the inside, like starts boiling up, like, oh, I don't know if I can do this. I feel like I'll be out of control. I'll eat everything in sight. Now, I'll say it again, the opposite is true. You absolutely can learn to trust yourself, and you can do that when you're no longer restricting, when food's no longer the one in charge. Now, I know that what happens is you're in this diet cycle, and anytime you've given yourself permission, I'm just going to say it, it's been like a pseudo permission, not really full permission. And so then you do feel out of control, which is the thing that you believe you're doing wrong, and it draws you back into the diet. That happens, right? That's the cycle you've been in probably for years. When you let go of the restriction and work through these thoughts and beliefs, you can get past that point. I would say the beginning feels hard because you have that same sensation, that same feeling, I'm out of control around food. But really, it's the food that you've been restricting that has caused that feeling. What if, okay, go with this one. What if the only reason you don't eat something is because you don't like it? I know, it's a crazy concept. It's something like my kids had to teach me. Like, they don't like it, they don't eat it. Or, maybe the other reason is, if you eat it, it's going to give you heartburn or some sort of digestive upset, like that's a real thing. But there isn't any of this, I should or shouldn't, this is good or bad, this is clean or dirty, whatever term we're using, right? Like this is healthy, unhealthy, that the only reason that you're not having something is because you know and trust your body. That is what we are working toward in making peace with food. There's kind of a little saying that I like to use is you can eat everything, but you don't have to. You're empowered to make the choice. When you're on a diet, when you're stuck in diet culture, it's like, again, this pseudo sense of empowerment. It's really not. There's a plan, there's a process, there's points, there's values. The food is dictating your choices, not you. I never deny the pendulum swing, that when you first give yourself unconditional permission to eat, you might find yourself eating past fullness. You might find yourself eating sometimes to the point of being really uncomfortable. This is a normal part of that breaking free of restriction of these foods. I can't tell you how long it's going to take you. It really is different for everyone. My story is different than your story, is different from my client's story. Each of my client's story is different. There's sometimes even specific foods that we're working on, and we kind of dive into the specifics of that, for each of my clients. And I walk them through this habituation exercise with those foods. The results are always amazing. What happens when they're no longer restricting, they're working through just having this food again and again and exposing themselves, to it and enjoying it. And they're like, wait a minute, what if I don't want this anymore? What if this is just food? What if this is not the thing that has control over me and I decide, no, I'm good. I don't need this. I always love scrolling through social media and I see, intuitive eating practitioners, sharing how there's this food in their pantry or their freezer, whatever it is that they totally forgot about. That's what happens when you make peace with food. Oh, right, I have this in here. I forgot. I had this story I shared a long time ago about peanut M&Ms in my house. What a trigger food that was. I actually had to work through the habituation exercise with peanut M&Ms to the point where I was like, I cannot have another peanut M&M. And now I just enjoy them when I want them. I am a grown-ass woman. I'm at the grocery store shopping for my family and they're right there. The big bags, the small ones right at checkout. I could grab it any time I want. And I only ever buy them if I'm in the mood and I want them. It is so much more freeing to make peace with food than constantly be stressed, have fear and guilt and shame when it comes to food. I really believe intuitive eating is the pathway to food freedom. It's something that I share about. Again, I've talked about it in my private community. Some of the women were asking the difference between the two, and that's just the way I view it. Intuitive eating, these principles, is the pathway to feeling fully free around foods, that you're the one in control, that you trust your own body. I really think this is the principle that draws women in to intuitive eating. They're tired of fearing food. They're tired of food being the enemy. They're tired of being so stressed, experiencing food guilt. They are just done with all of that. I believe this is the principle that draws us into intuitive eating because we want that peace. We want to be able to enjoy food without, beating ourselves up before, during, or after enjoying the food. And I can tell you from myself personally, living on both sides of it and then coaching clients through this side, the food freedom, the intuitive eating, the having peace with food, gosh, it is just a more enjoyable, satisfying place to exist. Well, that's the kind of bite-size episode on making peace with food, principle 3 of intuitive eating. And I'm really excited because I believe this goes so much hand in hand with principle 4 next week, which is challenging the food police. And I know for some it's a brand new concept to even identify the food police. So I'm excited to dive into that with you next week. Don't forget to head into the show notes, grab the workbook so you can do the deep dive questions. You can have all the key points that I shared here, like in one place for you as you are on this journey to intuitive eating and food freedom. All right, until next week, ladies. Hey ladies, have you heard the news? I have an amazing intuitive eating principles series right here on the podcast. And to help you dig deeper into your relationship with food and body, I have created a downloadable workbook that goes right along with the series. This is going to help you dig a little deeper into your own health, your own food story, and eating experience. Included is a weekly release of workbook pages, which will have a summary of key points from the episode, a personal notes section, and here's the most important part, you're going to have bonus reflection questions to go along with each of the episodes. This is going to help you dig a little deeper, understand yourself and your relationship with food and body better. You can purchase this workbook at any time and go through episodes 133 to 143. This workbook that I've created is for someone who is brand new to intuitive eating, just starting to learn. This is also for somebody who has really no idea what intuitive eating is at all. This workbook is also helpful if you have been on the intuitive eating journey and you just want to continue on that and dig a little deeper. Head to healthcoachforlife.com/IE workbook or head into the show notes of any of the episodes from the series.